Hello, everyone. If you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
Our bank account hit zero. What would you do if you checked your bank account before breakfast and realized your family had almost nothing left? I never imagined that one ordinary Tuesday morning in the United States would become the day that changed my marriage, my confidence, and the future of our family forever. I wasn't looking at a scam. I wasn't reading the wrong number. The money was simply gone. I wanted to panic, but what happened over the next few weeks taught me something far more valuable than money. If you've ever felt like life was closing every door at once, stay with me, because the decision we made next surprised even us. My name is Emily, and I live with my husband and our 2 children in a quiet neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio. From the outside, our life looked perfectly normal. Every weekday followed almost the same rhythm. I packed school lunches while my husband made coffee. The kids rushed around the house searching for shoes that somehow disappeared every morning. We waved to our neighbors, smiled politely, and drove off to work and school just like thousands of other American families. If you had passed our house, you probably would have thought everything was going well. The truth was very different. For months, prices had quietly climbed. Groceries cost more every week. Our electricity bill surprised us almost every month. Even simple family outings required careful planning. We kept telling ourselves it was temporary. We believed that if we worked a little harder, everything would return to normal. Instead, life became more expensive. That Tuesday morning started like every other. I poured myself a cup of coffee before opening our banking app. I wanted to make sure a payment had arrived before paying several bills scheduled for that afternoon. I smiled as the app loaded. Then my smile disappeared. I blinked once, twice. I refreshed the screen. The number stayed exactly the same. Available balance, $18.43. For a moment, I honestly thought the app had frozen. It hadn't. My breathing became slower, then faster. I quietly counted upcoming expenses in my head. Mortgage, electricity, gas, groceries, school supplies. There was no way $18 could carry a family of 4 through the week. I looked out the kitchen window while my children laughed together in the front yard, completely unaware of the storm quietly forming inside my mind. At that moment, I understood something psychologists often describe during periods of financial stress. When people suddenly face uncertainty, the brain naturally shifts into survival mode. Instead of solving problems creatively, it becomes focused on immediate danger. Researchers have found that money worries can reduce concentration and decision-making, making even simple choices feel overwhelming. I felt exactly that. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was thinking emotionally. Without realizing it, I squeezed my coffee mug so tightly my hand began to shake. Then my husband walked into the kitchen. He looked at me for only a second before asking, "What's wrong?" I turned my phone toward him. He stared at the screen without speaking. Neither of us blamed the other. Neither of us became angry. We simply stood there listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Finally, he whispered, "We'll figure it out." Those 4 words didn't solve our financial problem, but they stopped panic from taking control. My father used to tell me that difficult conversations become easier when people choose calm before conclusions. I remembered that advice while taking a slow breath. Around lunchtime, after dropping the children at school, I stopped at a small neighborhood cafe. I wasn't there to spend money. I ordered the least expensive cup of coffee on the menu and opened my notebook. Whenever I practiced English, I liked writing one useful phrase that matched real life. That day I wrote, "We'll find a way." I repeated it quietly. Again and again. Learning English suddenly felt different. It wasn't about perfect grammar anymore. It was about giving myself hopeful words during one of the hardest mornings of my life. As I closed the notebook, my phone vibrated. A new notification appeared from our bank. At first, I expected another bill. Instead, I saw something that made my heart stop. Important notice. Your account has been placed under temporary review. Please contact us immediately. I stared at the message, completely confused. We already had almost no money left. Now the bank wanted to review our account. I grabbed my keys and hurried toward the parking lot, unaware that the phone call I was about to make would reveal a mistake neither my husband nor I had seen coming. The hardest conversation. One unexpected phone call can change your entire week, but one honest conversation can change your entire life. As I sat in my car outside the cafe, my hands were trembling so badly that I almost dropped my phone before calling the bank. I expected to hear about a technical error or a delayed payment. Instead, I was about to learn something far more frightening. The problem wasn't just that we had almost no money left. The problem had been quietly growing for months, and neither my husband nor I had noticed until it was almost too late. I took a deep breath before pressing the call button. After verifying my identity, the customer service representative spoke with a calm and professional voice. Mrs. Carter, your account has been flagged because several automatic payments were processed within a very short period. I don't understand, I replied. She carefully listed each payment. Mortgage, car insurance, health insurance, utilities. A yearly subscription I had completely forgotten to cancel. Then one more charge appeared. A medical bill we thought our insurance had already covered. None of the charges were fraudulent. Every payment belonged to us. The problem was timing. Almost everything had been withdrawn within 48 hours. When the call ended, I simply sat there staring through the windshield. Cars came and went around the parking lot, people carried groceries to their vehicles, and life continued as though nothing had happened. Inside me, however, everything felt uncertain. That evening, after the children had gone upstairs to finish their homework, my husband and I sat at our kitchen table. No television, no phones, no distractions, only 2 mugs of tea growing colder by the minute. I expected the conversation to become emotional. Instead, something surprising happened. My husband quietly looked at me and said, "Let's promise each other one thing." What? We solved the problem. We don't fight each other. His words immediately lowered the tension in the room. Researchers who study healthy marriages often explain that couples who view financial problems as a shared challenge instead of a personal failure are more likely to stay emotionally connected during stressful times. That idea suddenly made perfect sense. Money wasn't sitting across the table. My husband wasn't the enemy. Neither was I. The real problem was the situation itself. For nearly 2 hours, we talked more honestly than we had in months. We listed every monthly expense, every subscription, every unnecessary purchase, every habit we had stopped noticing. Some discoveries made us laugh. Do we really have 3 streaming services? I asked. He smiled awkwardly. I thought you canceled one. I thought you did. For the first time that difficult day, we both laughed. It wasn't because the problem had disappeared. It was because laughter reminded us that hope was still alive. Before going to bed, I opened my small English notebook again. Whenever life became overwhelming, learning one simple sentence helped me slow my thoughts. That night I wrote, "One step at a time." I read it aloud, slowly, clearly. Then I repeated it with my husband. He smiled. I like that one. Learning English had quietly become part of our family routine. Not because we needed perfect pronunciation. Because positive words often create positive thinking. The next morning, we involved the children in a simple way. We didn't tell them every financial detail. Children deserve honesty, but they also deserve security. Instead, we explained that our family would be spending more carefully for a while. To our surprise, my daughter immediately smiled. "Can we have movie night at home instead of going to the theater?" My son raised his hand dramatically. "I'll skip buying snacks after soccer practice." Their responses nearly brought me to tears. Sometimes adults assume children only notice what they lose. In reality, they often notice how their parents respond. That afternoon, I created a handwritten family budget. Nothing complicated. Just clear numbers, clear goals, and one sentence across the top of the page. We're a team. For the first time since seeing our nearly empty bank account, I felt something unexpected. Control. Not because we suddenly had more money. Because we finally had a plan. Just as I finished writing, my husband's phone rang. He answered, listened quietly, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Hope? Shock? Fear? After hanging up, he remained silent for several long seconds. "What happened?" I asked. He slowly slid his phone across the table. "It's my former manager," he whispered. "He says there's a temporary position opening tomorrow morning." I smiled. Then he finished the sentence. "But there's one condition." My heart immediately began racing again. Whatever that condition was, it had the power to change everything. Living with less. Have you ever been offered the opportunity that could save your family, only to realize it might also take away the little time you still have together? My husband's former manager didn't call to offer an easy solution. The job paid well enough to help us recover financially, but the condition attached to it made the room fall completely silent. Sometimes life doesn't ask whether you want a difficult choice. It simply places two good things in front of you and quietly asks which one you're willing to sacrifice. My husband slowly placed his phone on the kitchen table. "He wants me to start on Monday." "That's wonderful," I said instinctively. He nodded, but he wasn't smiling. "The position is 6 months. Okay. It also requires overnight travel almost every week." The words hung in the air. For a family struggling financially, the offer sounded almost perfect. For a family trying to stay emotionally connected, it sounded much more complicated. Our children were finally settling into a healthy routine. We ate dinner together almost every evening. Weekend breakfasts had become our favorite family tradition. If my husband accepted the position, all of that would suddenly change. Neither of us spoke for a while. Psychologists often explain that financial stress doesn't only affect bank accounts. It also changes how couples make decisions. When people feel pressure, they naturally focus on solving today's emergency instead of protecting tomorrow's relationships. I could feel that happening inside my own mind. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately. Another part quietly asked a different question. What will this cost us besides money? The following morning, my husband attended the interview while I stayed home working remotely. During my lunch break, I opened the refrigerator. It looked emptier than I wanted to admit. Instead of feeling discouraged, I challenged myself to prepare dinner using only what we already had. A few vegetables, pasta, chicken broth, half a loaf of bread. Nothing fancy. Yet by evening, the whole house smelled warm and welcoming. When my children walked through the front door, my son smiled. "That smells amazing." I laughed. It turns out simple food can still taste pretty good. That dinner taught me something I hadn't expected. Sometimes abundance isn't about having more. Sometimes it's about appreciating enough. Later that evening, while washing dishes, I practiced another English expression I wanted to remember. Make the most of it. I repeated it quietly. My daughter overheard me. "What does that mean, Mom?" It means finding something good, even when life isn't perfect. She thought for a second. So, like making soup with whatever we already had? I smiled. Exactly. Those little conversations became my favorite way to practice English. Instead of memorizing difficult vocabulary, we connected simple phrases with real family experiences. The words stayed with us because they belonged to our story. Around 8 o'clock, my husband finally came home. I could tell immediately that something unexpected had happened. They offered me the job, he said. I hugged him. That's incredible. But there was that word again. But he sat down beside me. My manager changed the offer. I waited. He said if I accept, I'll probably become a permanent regional supervisor next year. That sounded like wonderful news. Until he continued. It would mean traveling even more. The room became quiet. Neither option felt completely right. Accepting the promotion could solve many of our financial worries. Turning it down could protect our family life, but leave us struggling much longer. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I couldn't sleep. Instead, I walked into the living room and looked through our family photo albums. Camping trips, birthday parties, school concerts, ordinary Saturdays. None of those memories depended on expensive vacations or luxury purchases. They were built from time, not money. As I closed the album, I noticed a folded piece of paper tucked between two photographs. I didn't recognize it. Curious, I unfolded it. It was an old handwritten grocery list. On the back, in my own handwriting from years earlier, I had written one sentence after a difficult season we had already forgotten. No matter what happens, we'll never choose money over each other. I stared at those words. Had I really written that? Before I could answer myself, my husband quietly walked into the room. I couldn't sleep either, he admitted. I handed him the note. He read it once, then looked at me with tears in his eyes. Without saying a word, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the official job offer. He held it for a long moment. Then, he slowly picked up a pen. An unexpected opportunity. Have you ever watched someone hold the answer to your biggest financial problem and then hesitate to accept it? My husband sat across from me with the job offer in one hand and a pen in the other. We needed the income. We needed stability. We needed hope. But we also knew that saying yes might quietly steal the family life we had worked so hard to protect. As the clock ticked past midnight, I realized this decision wasn't really about money anymore. It was about choosing the future we wanted our children to remember. For nearly a full minute, neither of us spoke. Then my husband slowly placed the pen back on the table. I can't sign this tonight, he said. I nodded. I'm glad. He looked surprised. You are? I don't want us making the biggest decision of our year while we're exhausted and afraid. He smiled for the first time that evening. Psychologists often explain that people make better long-term decisions after allowing intense emotions to settle. During stressful situations, the brain naturally focuses on immediate relief instead of lasting happiness. My father used to say something similar in much simpler words. Never make tomorrow's decision with today's panic. Those words suddenly felt wiser than ever. The next morning, after dropping the children off at school, I stopped at our neighborhood grocery store. My shopping list was shorter than usual. I carried a calculator, compared prices carefully, and chose store-brand products whenever possible. Something interesting happened. Instead of feeling embarrassed, I noticed many other shoppers doing exactly the same thing. A young couple stood beside the cereal aisle discussing coupons. An elderly man compared prices on canned soup. A mother quietly returned 2 items to the shelf before checking out. For the first time, I realized financial challenges weren't unique to our family. Many Americans were making difficult choices every single day. As I reached for a loaf of bread, a cheerful employee stocking the shelves smiled at me. "Looks like everyone's stretching their grocery budget these days." I laughed. "You're right." Then she asked a question I didn't expect. "Have you ever thought about working here?" I almost smiled politely and continued walking. Almost. Instead, I stopped. "What do you mean?" "We're hiring part-time associates. Flexible hours. Employee grocery discounts." I stared at her for a second. It wasn't the kind of opportunity one had imagined. But sometimes life doesn't knock on the front door. Sometimes it quietly speaks from the bread aisle. She handed me a small application card. "No pressure," she said. "I just thought you seemed kind." Those simple words stayed with me all afternoon. Kind. Not experienced. Not perfect. Kind. When I arrived home, I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation. During my English practice that evening, I wrote another short phrase into my notebook. Every opportunity matters. I repeated it several times while preparing dinner. My daughter overheard me again. "What does opportunity mean?" "It means a chance. A chance to do something better." She smiled. "Like making a new friend at school?" "Exactly." I love those little conversations because they reminded me that learning English wasn't separate from everyday life. Every new word became meaningful when connected to a real experience. Later that evening, my husband came home carrying the unsigned job offer. "I've been thinking all day," he admitted. "So have I." I told him about the grocery store conversation. To my surprise, he didn't laugh. Instead, he leaned forward. "Emily." "What?" "Maybe we're asking the wrong question." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "We keep asking which job pays more." He paused. "Maybe we should ask which choice gives our family the strongest future." His words changed everything. For the next 2 hours, we listed every possible option. His temporary travel position, the grocery store job, freelance work, weekend shifts, selling things we no longer used. Every idea went onto the list. None of them felt perfect. Together, however, they felt possible. Just before bedtime, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar local number. I answered. "Hello?" A friendly voice introduced herself. "Hi, Emily. This is Sarah, the store manager." My heart skipped. "I looked over your application." I hadn't even expected anyone to call that quickly. She continued. "We'd like to interview you tomorrow morning." I smiled. "Thank you so much." Then her tone became more serious. "There's just one thing you should know before you come." My smile slowly faded. "The position we discussed this afternoon," she paused, "is no longer the only opening available." I looked at my husband across the room. Something in her voice told me this conversation was about to take an unexpected turn. Love when money was gone. Have you ever discovered that the biggest test in a marriage isn't how much money you have, but how you treat each other when there's almost none left? The night before my interview, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying Sarah's final words. The position we discussed is no longer the only opening available. I wanted to believe this was the break our family had been praying for. But life had already taught me something important. Sometimes the opportunity you've been waiting for arrives wearing a completely different face than you expected. The next morning, I arrived at the grocery store 20 minutes early. I didn't want to rush. I wanted to breathe. The automatic doors opened, and the familiar smell of fresh bread and coffee welcomed me inside. Employees greeted customers with warm smiles while stocking shelves before the morning rush. Sarah met me near the customer service desk. She shook my hand. "I'm glad you came." "So am I." She led me into a small office at the back of the store. The interview didn't begin with questions about my resume. Instead, she asked something unexpected. Emily, tell me about the hardest problem you've solved recently. I smiled nervously. The truth? I prefer the truth. I took a slow breath. My husband and I almost ran out of money. She didn't interrupt. So instead of pretending everything was fine, we sat down, made a budget, canceled unnecessary expenses, and promised not to blame each other. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Interesting. Most people start by talking about work. You started by talking about trust. Her words caught me by surprise. After a few more questions, she folded her hands together. I mentioned another opening. Yes. It's in our community outreach department. I blinked. Community outreach? We partner with local food banks, schools, and nonprofit organizations. She smiled. The position pays a little more than cashier work. My heart immediately lifted. But, she continued. There was that word again. But. It requires organizing food donation events, speaking with volunteers, and occasionally giving short presentations. I hesitated. Public speaking? In English? My confidence instantly disappeared. I don't know if my English is good enough. Sarah looked at me kindly. You've communicated clearly during this entire interview. Grammar isn't everything. People remember sincerity. Those words stayed with me. Researchers who study communication often explain that confidence grows through action rather than waiting to feel ready. Perfection isn't what builds trust. Authenticity does. As I drove home, I couldn't stop repeating one English sentence my father used to encourage me whenever I doubted myself. I can learn. Not. I already know. Simply. I can learn. That small difference changed how the sentence felt. When I arrived home, my husband was waiting in the driveway. How did it go? I honestly don't know. We walked inside together. While the children worked on homework, I told him everything. The outreach position, the food bank, the presentations, the possibility of helping struggling families. Instead of talking about the salary first, he quietly smiled. Emily, you've always loved helping people. I know, but I'm scared. He laughed softly. You're always scared 5 minutes before doing something brave. I couldn't help laughing. He wasn't wrong. That evening, our daughter came into the kitchen carrying a school assignment. We have to write about someone we admire. Who are you writing about? I asked. She smiled without hesitation. You. I froze. Me? You and Dad. Why? She shrugged. Because even when you're worried, you still eat dinner with us, help with homework, and make us laugh. Her words hit me harder than any bank notification ever could. Children notice love long before they notice income. Later that night, I opened my English notebook again. I wrote another simple phrase. We're stronger together. My husband read it over my shoulder. I like that one even more. We repeated it together. Slowly. Naturally. It no longer felt like English practice. It felt like the truth. Just before bedtime, my phone buzzed. An email from Sarah had arrived. I smiled, expecting an interview update. Instead, the subject line made my heart race. Please call me before 8 a.m. No explanation. No congratulations. No rejection. Only one short message underneath. Something unexpected happened after you left. I looked at my husband. Neither of us knew whether that surprise would solve our problems, or create an entirely new one. Lessons money could never buy. Have you ever woken up to an email that made your heart race before your feet even touched the floor? I barely slept after reading Sarah's message. Please call me before 8 a.m. Something unexpected happened after you left. My mind imagined every possibility. Had they found someone more qualified? Had the position disappeared? Or had something incredible happened when I walked out the door? By sunrise, I realized something surprising. A few weeks earlier, I would have been terrified of bad news. Now, after everything our family had survived together, I felt stronger than I had in months. At exactly 7:30, I picked up my phone. My husband sat beside me at the kitchen table. Neither of us spoke. Sarah answered after the second ring. "Good morning, Emily." "Good morning. I have some news." I held my breath. After yesterday's interviews, our leadership team met. I waited. "They loved your experience." My shoulders relaxed. Then she added something unexpected. "They especially loved your story." My story? Yes. The way you described supporting your family, staying calm under pressure, and encouraging your children. I didn't know what to say. She continued. "We've decided to create a slightly different role." I blinked. "A different role?" "You'll still work with community outreach. But we'd also like you to coordinate our family literacy events." I smiled. "Family literacy?" She laughed gently. "You mentioned practicing simple English with your children. Our team loved that idea. We want someone who believes learning brings people together." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The very habit I had once considered small and ordinary had suddenly become one of my greatest strengths. Sometimes the things we overlook in ourselves are exactly what others value most. Research on positive psychology often shows that people experience deeper satisfaction when their work matches their personal values instead of simply offering higher income. Looking back, I finally understood why that mattered. I wasn't just searching for another paycheck anymore. I was searching for meaningful work. When the call ended, my husband hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you." "I haven't even accepted yet." "I know." "I'm still proud." That afternoon, I took a walk through our neighborhood before picking up the children from school. The air felt lighter. The trees lining the sidewalk swayed gently in the summer breeze. Neighbors waved as they walked their dogs or watered their gardens. Nothing around me had changed. Yet everything inside me had. For months, I had measured success by one number: our bank balance. Now another measurement quietly replaced it: peace. That evening, our daughter asked if we could continue our English notebook tradition. "Can I choose today's sentence?" she asked. "Of course." She thought carefully before writing 4 simple words. "Hope grows every day." She read them aloud. Then our son repeated them. My husband followed. Finally, I smiled and said them one more time. Slowly, clearly, together. Those few words filled our kitchen with something no paycheck could ever purchase: confidence. Later, while cleaning the dinner table, my husband looked at me thoughtfully. "Do you remember the night we saw only $18 in our account?" I'll never forget it. I thought we were losing everything. I nodded. So did I. He smiled softly. But somehow, I think we were finding ourselves. His words stayed with me long after everyone else had gone to bed. Money had taught us how quickly comfort could disappear. Hardship had taught us how quickly love could grow when people refused to give up on each other. Just before turning off the lights, my phone vibrated again. Another message from Sarah. This time it wasn't about paperwork. It wasn't about schedules. It wasn't even about the new position. Instead, she sent only one short sentence. "Emily, there's someone coming to tomorrow's orientation who specifically asked to meet you." I frowned. I didn't know anyone at the company. Who could possibly be asking for me? As I placed my phone on the bedside table, I had no idea that the person waiting at tomorrow's meeting would reconnect me with a chapter of my life I thought had ended forever. The light after the storm. What if the person waiting to meet you wasn't offering money, a promotion, or a miracle, but proof that one small act of kindness from years ago had quietly changed someone else's life? I walked into my first orientation believing I was starting a new job. Instead, I was about to discover that the hardest season of my life had already become the reason another family refused to give up. Sometimes the light at the end of a difficult journey isn't something you find. It's something you've unknowingly been creating all along. The community room was already full when I arrived. New employees chatted over coffee while managers prepared welcome folders. I looked around the room, trying to guess who had asked to meet me. No one looked familiar. Sarah waved me over with a warm smile. "Emily," she said. "Someone's been waiting." Before I could ask another question, a woman stood up from the second row. She looked about my age. Brown hair. Kind eyes. A smile that seemed strangely familiar. She walked toward me. "I don't know if you remember me." I searched my memory. Then suddenly, I did. "Rachel?" She laughed. "I was hoping you'd remember." 3 years earlier, Rachel had been standing in line behind me at a neighborhood bookstore. She had accidentally dropped several children's books while trying to calm her crying little boy. I helped her pick everything up, bought one extra reading book, and quietly placed it in her shopping bag before leaving. To me, it had been a small moment. I had forgotten about it. She hadn't. "You probably thought it was nothing," Rachel said. "But my husband had just lost his job. We couldn't afford that book. I cried in my car after you left. I felt my eyes fill with tears." I had no idea. She smiled. "That's exactly why I wanted to meet you." She explained that her son still owned that same storybook. Every night they had read it together. That simple routine had helped him fall in love with reading. Today, he was one of the strongest readers in his elementary school. I stood there speechless. Sometimes we measure generosity by its cost. Life measures it by its impact. Sarah quietly joined us. "This," she said, "is why we believed you belonged on our outreach team. Not because of my resume. Not because of perfect qualifications. Because compassion leaves evidence." The orientation continued, but my heart stayed with Rachel's story. During a break, we talked about family, work, and how difficult the past few years had been for so many people across the United States. Rising costs had challenged countless families, yet many communities had discovered something beautiful during those difficult times. Neighbors helped neighbors. Schools supported parents. Strangers became friends. Hope often travels quietly. That afternoon, I helped organize my first literacy event. Children sat in small circles listening to volunteers read simple English stories aloud. Watching them smile reminded me of our own family evenings around the kitchen table. One little girl struggled with the word beautiful. She frowned. "I can't say it." I knelt beside her. "You can't say it. Yet?" She smiled. "Yet?" Together we practiced slowly. "Beautiful." Again. A little more confidently. "Beautiful." Her face lit up. I realized something at that moment. Learning English and rebuilding a life have something important in common. Neither happens all at once. Both grow one small step at a time. That evening, I came home happier than I had felt in months. The children immediately noticed. "Mom's smiling again," my son whispered dramatically. Everyone laughed. During dinner, we continued our English tradition. Today's sentence was simple. "Kindness comes back." Each of us repeated it. Then my husband quietly added, "I think we proved that today." After dinner, the doorbell rang. It was our next-door neighbor, Mr. Wilson. He held a small envelope. This was delivered to our mailbox by mistake. I thanked him and looked down. The return address belonged to our mortgage company. My stomach tightened. Had another problem appeared? I slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a letter with one sentence highlighted in bold. "Your recent account review has resulted in an important update regarding your loan." I looked at my husband. He looked back at me. Neither of us smiled. Neither of us panicked. But we both knew that whatever waited on the next page had the power to change our family's future, once again. Hope returned. What if the letter you were afraid to open turned out to be the first sign that your hardest season was finally coming to an end? I held the envelope from our mortgage company with both hands, remembering how another notification from the bank had once made my heart sink. Back then, every message seemed to bring more bad news. But this time felt different. I couldn't explain why. Maybe it was because our family had already learned that fear doesn't always tell the truth. Sometimes the letter you dread the most carries the hope you've almost stopped expecting. My husband sat beside me at the kitchen table. The children were upstairs getting ready for bed. The house was quiet except for the soft ticking of the wall clock. I carefully unfolded the letter. The first few paragraphs contained the usual formal language. Then I reached the highlighted section. Based on your recent financial review and updated income information, you may qualify for a loan modification program that could reduce your monthly mortgage payment. I read the sentence twice, then a third time. My husband gently took the letter. His eyes widened. This could really help us. For the first time in months, our biggest monthly expense no longer felt impossible. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't winning the lottery. It was something even better. A realistic opportunity. Financial experts often explain that reducing one major monthly expense can relieve a significant amount of long-term stress. When families experience less financial pressure, they often communicate more calmly, make better decisions, and enjoy stronger relationships. Looking back, I realized we had already started changing before our finances improved. Money wasn't saving our marriage. Our marriage was helping us rebuild our finances. The following week brought another surprise. My husband accepted a revised position with his former company. Instead of traveling almost every week, he negotiated a hybrid schedule that allowed him to work from home several days each month. A few months earlier, he would have accepted the first offer without asking questions. Now he understood something different. Balance matters. When he shared the news with the children, they cheered louder than I expected. Does that mean you'll still be home for movie night? My daughter asked. He smiled. I wouldn't miss it. My son raised both hands in celebration. Best job ever. We all laughed. Those small moments reminded me that children rarely remember salary numbers. They remember who is sitting beside them on the couch. At work, the literacy program continued growing. Every Saturday morning, families gathered at the community center to read simple English stories together. Some parents worried their pronunciation wasn't perfect. I always told them the same thing. Your children won't remember every word. They'll remember that you read with them. One afternoon, a father thanked me after class. I almost stopped trying. Now my daughter asks me to read every night. His words made me smile because they sounded so familiar. Hope spreads quietly. One family encourages another. One conversation changes another. One story continues long after it's finished. That evening, our family English notebook gained another sentence. My son carefully wrote it in large letters. Small steps change lives. We repeated it together. Slowly. Clearly. Then my daughter added something that wasn't written anywhere. I think that's true about families too. I looked at her proudly. I think you're right. As autumn arrived in Ohio, life finally felt steady again. We weren't wealthy. We weren't free from challenges. But we were no longer living in fear. The greatest change wasn't visible in our bank account. It appeared in our conversations. We laughed more. We worried less. We listened better. One quiet Sunday afternoon, while organizing old paperwork in the hallway closet, I found the notebook where I had written our very first emergency budget months earlier. Across the top of the first page were 4 handwritten words. "We're a team." I smiled. We had kept that promise. Just as I closed the notebook, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed a number I didn't recognize. I answered. A calm voice spoke. "Hello, Emily?" "Yes?" "I'm calling from the local community foundation. I believe someone anonymously nominated your family for this year's Community Hope Award." I froze. "My family?" "Yes. We'd love to tell you who submitted your name." She paused. "But you'll need to attend the ceremony first." I looked at my husband in complete disbelief. After everything we had been through, one final mystery was waiting for us. And somehow, it felt even more personal than the empty bank account that had started this unforgettable journey. What real wealth means. What if the greatest reward for surviving your hardest financial season wasn't a bigger paycheck, but discovering that your family had become stronger than you ever imagined? The invitation to the Community Hope Award sat on our kitchen counter for 3 days before I finally opened it again. I kept wondering who could have nominated us. We weren't famous. We hadn't donated large amounts of money. We had simply tried to stay kind while life felt unbelievably difficult. I had no idea that one ordinary evening at the ceremony would reveal a truth more valuable than anything we had ever lost or earned. The community center looked beautiful that Saturday evening. Soft lights decorated the entrance. Families greeted one another with warm smiles. Children laughed while volunteers prepared the stage. It didn't feel like a formal award ceremony. It felt like a celebration of everyday people. My husband squeezed my hand. "Whatever happens tonight," he whispered, "I'm already proud of us." I smiled. Months earlier, those words would have sounded impossible. Back then, I believed success meant solving every financial problem. Now I understood something different. Success also meant refusing to lose ourselves while solving them. The ceremony began with stories. Not about wealth. Not about business. About neighbors helping neighbors. Teachers staying after school. Parents encouraging children. Volunteers sharing food, books, and hope. Listening to those stories reminded me that every family carries invisible challenges. Some struggle financially. Some battle illness. Some face loneliness. Very few people have a completely easy life. Psychologists often describe this as shared humanity. When people realize they are not alone in their struggles, feelings of shame become smaller, while resilience grows stronger. Looking around the room, I felt exactly that. We had never been alone. Finally, the host stepped onto the stage. Our next recognition goes to a family whose kindness continued even during their own difficult season. My heart started beating faster. The screen behind her displayed several photographs. There we were, reading with children at the literacy program, helping organize food donations, smiling together during community events. I looked at my husband. Neither of us had submitted those pictures. The host continued. They reminded us that generosity isn't measured by how much you own. It's measured by what you're willing to share. Tears filled my eyes. Then she smiled. We'd like to invite Emily and her family to the stage. The applause felt overwhelming. As we walked forward, I noticed someone standing beside the podium. Rachel, the woman from the bookstore. She smiled through tears. "It was me," she whispered. "I nominated you." I hugged her tightly. "You changed my son's life with one children's book. You reminded me that hope doesn't have to be expensive." I couldn't speak. Sometimes one quiet decision continues changing lives long after you've forgotten making it. After the ceremony, families gathered for refreshments. Children ran around carrying cookies while parents shared stories. A little boy approached me holding an English reading book. "Miss Emily," he asked shyly, "will you sign my book?" I laughed softly. "I'm not an author." He smiled. "But you're the reason I like reading." Those simple words became one of the greatest compliments I had ever received. On the drive home, our daughter opened the family English notebook. "I know today's sentence," she said. She carefully wrote, "Love makes us rich." We all repeated it together. Slowly, clearly. The words sounded simple. Their meaning felt enormous. When we arrived home, my husband quietly checked our bank account before locking his phone. He looked at me and smiled. "Do you remember when we had only $18 left?" "I'll never forget." He nodded. "We have more now." I smiled. "I know." Then I pointed toward our children laughing together in the living room. "But honestly, I think we became rich long before our bank account did." He laughed. "I completely agree." Just before going to bed, I placed the Community Hope Award on the bookshelf. As I stepped back, I noticed an envelope tucked underneath the frame. It hadn't been there earlier. There was no stamp, no return address, only my name written neatly across the front. I looked around the empty living room, confused. Who had left it? I slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note containing only one sentence. "The greatest gift your family gave someone is something you still don't know about." My heart began racing once again. Whoever wrote that note clearly knew a secret that even I had never heard. And somehow, I knew the final chapter of our story was only just beginning. What we did next. What happened after we nearly ran out of money surprised me more than losing it in the first place. The mysterious note on our bookshelf wasn't another bill, another warning, or another financial problem. Instead, it became the final piece of a journey that taught my family something millions of people spend their entire lives chasing. Looking back now, I can honestly say the day our bank account almost reached zero wasn't the day our life fell apart. It was the day we finally began building the life we had always wanted. I carefully unfolded the handwritten note. The paper was plain. The handwriting looked unfamiliar. Below the first sentence was one more message. "If you'd like to know the rest of the story, visit the community library tomorrow at 10 a.m. No signature. No explanation. Just a place. The next morning, our family drove to the library together. Autumn leaves covered the sidewalks, and the cool Ohio air carried the scent of fresh coffee from a nearby cafe. Children were arriving for the weekly reading program, laughing as they hurried toward the entrance with books tucked under their arms. Inside, Sarah greeted us with a smile. "So you came. You knew about the note?" I asked. She nodded. I did. Before I could ask another question, an older gentleman walked toward us. His silver hair and gentle smile immediately made everyone feel comfortable. "My name is Mr. Harrison," he said. "I oversee the Community Literacy Foundation." He held a thin folder in his hands. "Emily, several months ago, one of the parents from your reading program wrote us a letter." He opened the folder and began reading. Before meeting Emily, my daughter believed reading was only for children who were already good at it. Today, she reads to her younger brother every night. She says stories gave her courage. My eyes filled with tears. Mr. Harrison smiled warmly. That wasn't the only letter. He showed us another. Then another. Families. Volunteers. Teachers. Parents. Each letter described a small moment I barely remembered. Helping a nervous child pronounce a difficult word. Staying after class to encourage a father who felt embarrassed about his English. Sharing books with families who couldn't easily afford them. I had never considered those moments extraordinary. Yet together, they had quietly transformed many lives. Researchers often describe this as the ripple effect. One small act of encouragement can inspire another, creating positive change far beyond what the original person ever sees. Looking around the room, I realized our financial struggle had unknowingly prepared me to understand other people's fears without judging them. Sometimes our greatest difficulties become our greatest qualifications. Mr. Harrison looked at me again. Our foundation has voted unanimously. He handed me one final envelope. Inside was an official letter. It wasn't a large check. It wasn't a prize. It was an invitation. They wanted me to help lead family literacy programs across several communities in Ohio, training volunteers to use simple stories and everyday conversations to build confidence in children and adults learning English together. I looked at my husband. He smiled before I even spoke. This is exactly where you're meant to be. On the drive home, we stopped at a small park overlooking a quiet lake. The children ran ahead while my husband and I sat on a wooden bench. "Do you remember that morning?" he asked. "The one with $18? I laughed softly. I remember every second. If someone had told us we'd end up here, I never would have believed them. He squeezed my hand. We thought money would save us. I nodded. But love, honesty, and hope saved us first. That evening, our family gathered around the kitchen table one last time. Our English notebook was almost full. My daughter smiled. "I think Mom should write the last sentence." I picked up the pen slowly. Then I wrote, "The best things we built cost nothing." We all read it together. Once. Twice. Then we closed the notebook. Not because our story had ended, but because a new chapter had already begun. Today, our bank account is healthier than it was during those difficult months. Our home is still simple. Our dinners are still ordinary. Our movie nights are still filled with laughter. The difference is that now we understand what real wealth looks like. It looks like trust after fear, hope after disappointment, children who feel safe, a marriage that chooses teamwork instead of blame, and a family that discovered its greatest treasure only after believing it had almost nothing left. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this story encouraged you or helped you practice English one sentence at a time, remember this. Your hardest season does not have to become your final chapter. Sometimes the smallest step, the kindest word, or the simplest conversation becomes the beginning of a completely different future. That's all for today. I'll make many more stories like this in the future. Please subscribe so you don't miss the next one.